5 witnesses testified this week. 2 former employees, a Los Angeles police officer, fire department investigator, and a celebrity stylist. The latest witness on the stand testifying under the pseudonym Mia, recounting her time as Combs' former assistant.
Mia is not her real name. She agreed to testify only if extraordinary measures were taken to hide her identity. Reporters were ordered not to describe her, and get this, even the courtroom sketch artist was ordered not to draw her. Her attorney says she did not want to testify and had hoped that she could take what happened to her grave.
Prosecutors are utilizing her in part to prop up their argument that Sean Combs essentially abused his employees. And though she was only his personal assistant for about a year, she described it as chaotic and toxic. She has alleged on the stand that Sean Combs sexually assaulted her on more than one occasion. She also said he physically abused her by throwing things at her. She said he once threw her in a pool, dumped a bucket of ice on her, and that was a regular part of her day-to-day life as his employee, at least as his personal assistant. She later worked for him in a different capacity.
For 8 years, she stayed silent. She was a background figure, an assistant in the shadows, trained to manage chaos and protect the reputation of one of the most powerful names in entertainment. But when Mia took the stand under a pseudonym, what she revealed was unlike anything the courtroom had heard before. Her voice trembled, her eyes stayed fixed on the floor, but her words carved through the silence like a blade. She wasn't just a witness, she was an insider. And what she had seen, what she had lived through behind closed doors, painted a picture not of glamour, but of control, fear, and a sprawling network built to keep it all hidden. The courtroom leaned in, and as the testimony unfolded, it became clear this wasn't just about one man. This was about an entire machine. Let's break it all down. When Mia signed her employment papers, she pictured a demanding but ordinary role in entertainment, the kind that offers networking opportunities if you keep your head down and exceed expectations. Her official responsibilities looked simple: arrange travel, track down studio masters, manage wardrobes, and shield a chart-topping mogul from the endless requests flooding his inbox. The illusion cracked the first day.
She said the highs were really high and the lows were incredibly low, and it was an incredibly high-pressure work environment. In fact, she was rarely home. Her friends called her a ghost because she was always with Sean Combs. She worked 24 hours straight her first day on the job. She thought maybe that this was a bit of a test, but it turns out that was a regular occurrence. One time, she worked 5 days straight without sleep. She said she had to utilize Adderall in order to be able to do so. She said Combs really was in charge of her life. When she stayed with him at his house, she was not allowed to lock her bedroom door, and that goes to one of her allegations.
Security asked to inspect her phone. Non-disclosure agreements thicker than magazines slid across a table, and veteran staff quietly warned her, handle it quietly or handle it somewhere else. From then on, she functioned less like an assistant and more like a personal sentry, anticipating every mood shift and extinguishing problems before they reached the tabloids. She booked dawn studio sessions, kept burner numbers for physicians on standby, and memorized which bodyguards protected Cassie in public and which were dismissed once penthouse curtains closed. Cassie became Mia's primary assignment, and the directive was blunt: log her movements by the hour, report deviations immediately. Over time, Mia witnessed a chain of command so rigid that senior executives lowered their voices whenever the boss appeared, and she grasped the unspoken truth that every flawless red carpet moment relied on invisible labor no outsider could mention. The months turned into years, and admiration gave way to unease. A single missed text might ignite a storm of shouting that sent junior staff scrambling. A hotel greeting worded poorly could end a career overnight. An entire transportation crew vanished after one driver showed sympathy for Cassie's tears. Nobody dared utter no in front of the boss. Instead, they stalled with phrases such as "consider it solved" while racing to patch crises out of sight. Mia learned the layout of private clinics willing to place stitches without paperwork, and the luxury property managers who would erase security footage for a fee. Gradually, she saw how fear, ambition, and loyalty braided together until diligence blurred into complicity. Those who lasted longest perfected the art of seeming helpful while seeing nothing at all, and her growing discomfort set her apart. Still, she filed expense reports and calmed Cassie's nerves until the night inside a Manhattan apartment when everything unraveled before her eyes. forcing a choice between the code of silence and the instinct to protect someone who clearly needed help. The turning point arrived without warning. Mia and stylist Deontay Nash were chatting softly in Cassie's living room, while the singer rummaged through a closet, the late afternoon light washing the apartment in a calm that felt overdue. The front door slammed, sending a glass candle holder rattling across a table, and their employer strode in with a fury that cracked the air itself. He demanded Cassie's whereabouts, eyes scanning the room like searchlights, then seized her wrist the moment she appeared. The next seconds blurred as he yanked her toward the bedroom, and a muffled thud followed by a cry told Mia this was no argument. Instinct overrode years of drilled-in obedience. Mia sprinted down the hallway, Nash right behind her, grasping at his shoulders to pry him away, but he shook them off as if they were feathers.
She said that the punishment essentially was typically unpredictable, but typically pretty terrifying. And then lastly, just before lunch, she described that scene that we heard Cassie describe and Deontay Nash when Cassie was beat up in her bedroom by Diddy in front of both Nash and Mia to the point where she was bleeding from her head. She described that situation as incredibly terrifying, saying that she tried to get Diddy to stop, but he wouldn't. She says his eyes turned black and that he was essentially looking right through her. She says those are the moments where she really knew that not only Cassie was in incredible danger, but that he was as well.
The clash of bodies against a bed frame echoed, and Mia caught a glimpse of Cassie's head striking the wooden edge, leaving a crimson line above her brow that widened into a gash. Panic coursed through her, yet protocol was clear. Calling emergency services would unleash questions paparazzi could feast on, so she grabbed towels and applied pressure while Nash pleaded for calm. Their employer barked an order to phone a specific assistant who knew doctors, insisting this was a private matter. He dictated the official story on the spot, claiming Cassie had slipped after drinking. Even in shock, Mia registered how smoothly the cover-up machinery clicked into place, confirming what she had suspected for months. Secrecy wasn't an occasional tactic. It was the operating system. Back in the hallway, Mia noticed her own hands trembling as she wiped splattered droplets from the beige wall, already thinking about how to explain the stains to building staff without triggering curiosity. The assistant on the other end of the call promised a surgeon who asked no questions, and within an hour, Cassie was stitched up under a false name. When they returned, a new mattress frame had already arrived, and maintenance staff were tipped generously to remove the damaged one before sunrise. The speed and precision of the cleanup stunned Mia more than the shouting she had witnessed. She realized that if such a serious incident could vanish overnight, any boundary she believed existed was imaginary. In silence, she replayed the moment Cassie's expression shifted from pain to resignation, a look suggesting this wasn't an isolated eruption, but part of an ongoing pattern hidden behind studio glamour. As Mia lay awake that night, she wondered what else the inner circle had normalized, and her thoughts drifted to the cryptic phrase she had overheard earlier in the week: hotel night. She did not yet know exactly what those words meant, but the dread Cassie showed when she whispered them hinted at even darker routines waiting to be uncovered. It began with a simple text. Whenever the phrase hotel night flashed on Cassie's phone, Mia felt the temperature in the room drop.
And they also spoke about the freak-offs, and that's something we've heard about since day one, pretty much opening statement. These days-long drug-fueled orgies where Cassie alleges that she was forced to participate. But Mia spoke about it from her perspective and how she felt that Cassie was feeling about participating in these.
Mia details being in the car with Cassie in Los Angeles, and she says that, her boss, Sean Combs, called Cassie, and Cassie just said, ugh, Puff wants to do a hotel night, and that's how they referred to them, the staff, a hotel night. And she said she could immediately see Cassie's whole demeanor change. She got upset, she got nervous, she started getting stomach issues. She said she got sick, and that's something that we heard from Cassie on her testimony, just how she, had these physical reactions to having to do these freak-offs.
The term sounded harmless, yet Mia quickly learned it was a coded alert meaning bags needed packing, luxury suites had to be secured under burner reservations, and a discreet convoy should stand by curbside, no questions asked. Cassie's posture would stiffen, her voice sink into a near whisper, and a heavy silence would settle over the apartment. These nights unfolded in 5-star rooms sealed from prying eyes, where scented candles and blackout curtains masked exhaustion behind curated intimacy. Drivers knew to wait outside until dawn, and assistants were told to supply endless towels, bottled water, and expensive oils. From her position at the edge of this choreography, Mia watched the emotional toll accumulate. Cassie clutching her stomach in the car, trembling hands navigating hotel corridors, and a forced half-smile offered to concierges whose job was to forget what they saw. Staff whispered another code, "man down," the morning after, signifying that both participants would be too depleted to appear in public and that schedules needed rearranging to hide the crash. To Mia, each instance felt like hearing the same minor chord played louder and louder until it rattled the windows. Yet no one dared reach for the power switch. What troubled Mia most was how smoothly the supporting apparatus functioned. A favored travel agent could reserve penthouse floors under pseudonyms within minutes. Doctors on retainer stood by to administer intravenous fluids to restore outward radiance, and private security blocked hotel corridors so thoroughly that housekeeping never glimpsed the mess until after sunrise. Even the fragrance spritzed in the hallways was chosen to neutralize telltale scents before paying guests checked out. Mia's role remained consistent, yet unsettling. She transported sealed duffel bags of supplies, monitored incoming calls to prevent unapproved visitors, and fielded panicky text messages from junior staff begging for instructions when something spilled or shattered inside the suite. Outside, flashbulbs continued to celebrate chart success and glossy magazine covers. But Mia now understood those images rested upon a pattern of carefully shielded nights that no press release would ever mention. As she rode the service elevator down after one particularly grim session, her thoughts raced toward the aftermath awaiting her at daybreak. The drivers would leave, the blackout curtains would lift, and a scene the public would never imagine would require immediate restoration. That assignment, known among the staff as the sweep, would test every limit of Mia's composure and would force her to confront just how deeply secrecy had been built into her job description.
And Mia spoke about stuff she had to do after the freak-offs as an employee of Diddy's, and she called it a sweep.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we've heard from other personal assistants that part of the job was about protecting Diddy's reputation, and all of them actually directly spoke about being afraid that hotel staff might sell pictures of the hotel rooms and embarrass Diddy. And we even heard from one hotel manager and looked at Diddy's account, right? We know that the hotels said there was excessive amounts of candle wax melted all over the room, that there was oil everywhere. This was kind of the norm, and we heard the same from Mia. She said she would go in, she would have to wipe up blood that she was told was from, Cassie's period. She would have to wipe up the baby oil as best she could. She said she couldn't do anything about the candle wax, that there would be wet towels everywhere. She said the room literally looked like a nightmare. That's how she described it. But she said that was part of her job, to clean all of that up afterward, and also to take Cassie and Diddy to and from those hotels and just be on call for anything Diddy needed at the time.
At sunrise, Mia unlocked the penthouse and stepped into a world that felt half frozen in time. Scented candles had burned down to blackened wicks, silk cushions were overturned, and droplets of dark stain dotted the edge of a velvet chaise. She moved quickly, gloved hands whisking damp towels into oversized laundry sacks, spritzing peroxide on any fabric that hinted at discoloration, and scraping cooled wax from marble before housekeeping made its rounds. Crystal flutes with lipstick smudges disappeared into cardboard carriers, shattered glass slid into padded disposal bins, and monogrammed linens were swapped for identical fresh sets delivered overnight by a private courier. Each step of her checklist unfolded with mechanical precision. Curtains cracked open for exactly 90 seconds to release stagnant air, ozone machines activated to neutralize lingering odor, and a discreet call placed to reception ensuring the floor remained "do not disturb" until checkout. By the time a bellhop arrived with breakfast trays, the suite had morphed back into the image printed on the hotel website. Every trace of turmoil compressed into sealed bags already headed down a service lift toward an unmarked van. Once the visible wreckage vanished, Mia turned to the choreography that kept the fiction intact. A florist appeared with white orchids to replace wilted arrangements. A driver idled curbside holding garment bags and a chilled nutrient infusion. And a private physician waited in an adjoining suite, ready to administer cosmetic boosters that erased fatigue from the public eye. Mia settled invoices under an alias, tucked cash tips into folded receipts, and logged photographic proof of the restored room in a password-protected archive, evidence meant only for the inner circle. As she exited, she noticed her own reflection in the gilded mirror, shoulders tense from hours of silent labor, and realized that luxury in this world was measured not by chandeliers or rooftop views, but by the power to rewrite reality before lunchtime. The discomfort she felt grew heavier with every sweep, yet breaking contract would jeopardize the income supporting her family and expose her to lawsuits over ironclad non-disclosure clauses. She told herself she could endure, but the next crisis would shatter that illusion, forcing her to confront the rage directly when it hurled her barefoot into a driveway at 3 a.m, a moment that proved no employee stood safely behind the curtain they worked so hard to maintain. The confrontation that finally pulled Mia from the shadows arrived on an ordinary work night that turned extraordinary in seconds. It was close to 3 a.m. inside a Los Angeles mansion, humming with low music and scattered staff when the boss demanded a late-night food run from a nearby 24-hour diner. Mia nodded, intending to obey, but first darted toward her room so she could address an urgent personal need.
She also talked about an instance where he threw a bowl of spaghetti at her at 3 a.m. after they got back from some party they were at, and a lot of people were at his house. This was in LA, and I guess he told her to go to IHOP. She said she'd been working since 8 a.m. and she had her period, and she's like, I have to, she couldn't tell him I have to change my tampon because he was screaming at her, like, go to IHOP, and she was trying to go to her room to get a tampon, and he was yelling at her. And she finally turned around and said she had like blood dripping down her leg, and she was just like I can't do this, and started to walk away, and he threw an entire bowl of spaghetti at her. And then she got a call from HR the next day saying that she was suspended without pay.
She tried to explain the situation, pointing at the blood seeping through her clothing as proof she needed a moment in private. Yet her words barely left her lips before rage erupted behind her. He shouted that servants did not set their own timetable, seized a ceramic bowl of leftover spaghetti, and hurled it across the foyer. The dish whistled past her face, splattering sauce across the wall. Then he lunged forward, forcing Mia to flee through a side door and down the driveway in bare feet. Gravel cut her soles as she hid among hedges, listening to footsteps searching the darkness. Only after minutes of silence did she sprint to a nearby hotel, checking in under a false name while still wearing clothes stained from the ordeal. Alone in the unfamiliar room, she stared at the ceiling, heartbeat hammering, realization settling in that devotion to secrecy offered no shield once anger chose a new target. Sunrise did not bring solace. Instead, her phone lit up with a call from Human Resources instructing her to report immediately. In a sterile office, she learned she was being placed on unpaid suspension because the boss had complained of insubordination. No mention of the bowl, the chase, the bush where she crouched, in fear. The department that should have protected employees served as another instrument of control, enforcing punishment while insisting everything was standard procedure. Colleagues avoided eye contact when she returned to collect her belongings, and she understood that anyone who acknowledged what had happened risked sharing her fate. Driving away with her suitcase in the trunk, Mia felt the final thread of loyalty begin to snap. The organization she once admired thrived on intimidation masked by elegance, and the boundaries between personal, professional, and perilous had collapsed. Yet even that sleepless night could not equal the dread she carried from 2 earlier encounters she had tried to lock away, memories that would surface under oath and silence the courtroom more effectively than any gavel ever could. The first memory Mia shared came from a lavish 40th birthday celebration held in the penthouse of a landmark hotel, a party so opulent that even the chandeliers seemed to shimmer in time with the DJ's bass. Her official duty that evening was simple: ferry requests between kitchen, bar, and the guest of honor. Near midnight, he waved her into a service alcove, dismissed the sous chefs with a flick of his wrist, and filled 2 shot glasses with premium vodka, raising a toast to another decade of greatness. Mia rarely drank on the job, but refusing any direct request was unthinkable. She downed the liquor, felt an unfamiliar rush flood her senses, and the room began to tilt.
For the beginning of the afternoon, we just heard more details about the physical assault and the emotional abuse that she withstood as she worked for Sean Combs. But just in the last few minutes, right before I left this afternoon, we were discussing this assault that she endured with Sean Combs, assault that began right after she started working with him, just within a few months. The first one at the Plaza Hotel that Sean Combs had rented out for his 40th birthday party. He got her in the kitchen of his penthouse and had her take 2 shots. She said she remembered feeling it immediately, feeling that it was much stronger than what she would typically feel taking 2 shots. and then he had pressed her up against the wall and put his hands up her dress as he kissed her. That was just the beginning. Within the next few months, she was sleeping at his house. She was not allowed to lock her doors, and she woke up to the weight of Sean Combs on top of her. She said through tears that he unbuttoned his pants and inserted himself inside of her. She said it went on for what felt like a lifetime, even though it just went for a few minutes. She said she felt terrified, confused, ashamed, and scared, but that she never said anything, that she was frozen with fear.
He moved closer, bracing one arm against the wall above her head while the other hand slid beneath her dress. Panic froze her, sound distorted, vision blurred, and the next clear memory was sunlight streaming across a lounge chair where she awoke fully clothed but disoriented, hours unaccounted for. She convinced herself the incident was a drunken lapse, telling no one and burying the confusion under the mountain of tasks that awaited her the following day. Months later, any illusion that the first encounter had been an isolated misstep vanished during an overnight stay at his primary residence. Staff bedrooms lined a long corridor, their doors deliberately stripped of locks because, as he often reminded them, this is my house. Shortly before dawn, Mia stirred to wait, pressing down on her mattress and the hushed command to keep quiet. In the dim glow of a hallway nightlight, she recognized him kneeling over her, undoing his belt with purposeful calm. Fear pinned her to the sheets. She neither fought nor spoke, caught between shock and dread of repercussions that might follow any resistance. When he left, she curled into the corner of the bunk bed, staring at the ceiling until morning rounds began. Later, prosecutors asked why she never reported these encounters. Mia explained that she could not even push back on a sandwich order without risking suspension, so how could she challenge something far more personal?
Mia testifying Combs assaulted her more than once while she was employed, but never told Ventura, who wasn't there when the alleged assaults happened, adding she felt terrified and trapped.
It was so difficult for her to talk about it, and that's quite obviously one of the reasons why she was so soft-spoken today, because it's re-traumatizing to talk about again.
Mia telling the court she felt like she couldn't say no, fearing she would become a target if she did, putting her physical well-being at risk. He would fire me and ruin my future and somehow twist the story into making me look like a threat. She also testified she didn't think reporting the assaults was an option, saying it's the most shameful thing of my life.
They're establishing the sort of hierarchy of the business that Sean Diddy Combs had in the way that a mafia has the hierarchy.
Her testimony ended with tears, yet the prosecution was just beginning to connect these moments to a broader strategy of control that, according to their argument, enlisted doctors, drivers, and even local patrol officers. What appeared to be two isolated nightmares would soon be framed as deliberate pieces of a much larger puzzle, a puzzle the jury would start assembling in the very next phase of the trial. Courtroom spectators often imagine wrongdoing as the lone act of a single individual, but Mia's testimony revealed a lattice of interconnected players who, knowingly or not, kept the machinery running. She described a rotating roster of drivers, instructed to turn off dashboard cameras on command, security contractors who diverted hotel surveillance feeds into private hard drives, and medical professionals who expedited stitched wounds, intravenous rehydration, and quick discharge forms, without asking how injuries occurred. Hotel managers blocked housekeeping from entering suites until Mia's sweeps were finished, while publicists quietly shifted press appearances to disguise unexplained absences. Even law enforcement officers, according to Mia, appeared starstruck during traffic stops, greeting the mogul by name, and tearing up citations once they heard his voice on speakerphone. These overlapping layers formed what prosecutors called an enterprise, a network that insulated its center from consequences, and that, through favors and payouts, blurred moral lines for everyone involved. Each participant handled a small task, cancel a bill here, edit a roster there, yet together their actions created a shield so broad that the truth rarely pierced it. Mia's recollections painted a portrait of reputation management elevated to an art form, where the cost of preserving the brand eclipsed any concern for the people beneath it. Prosecutors leveraged her account to argue that such coordination was not accidental but strategic, crafted to deter witnesses from seeking help and to keep potential investigations fragmented. Mia emphasized that every assistant knew which doctors to dial, which hotels would accept cash for damaged linens, and which security firms specialized in wiping digital traces. From her vantage, she saw how loyalty was rewarded with bonuses, luxury gifts, and exclusive invitations, while hesitation invited demotion or sudden separation agreements. Fear of unemployment, combined with hefty non-disclosure contracts, kept resignations quiet and grievances sealed behind arbitration clauses. The government's case rests on proving that this orchestrated ecosystem served more than hospitality. It allegedly enabled patterns of intimidation, forced secrecy, and labor under coercive conditions. Yet for jurors to convict, they must weigh a more nuanced question. Were the people inside this network acting freely, or were their choices shaped by power they could not resist? That distinction, where cooperation ends and control begins, sets the stage for the final debate on what consent truly means within an empire of influence, a debate that unfolds in the next phase of the trial. With Mia's stories on the record, the courtroom shifted from dramatic testimony to careful dissection, calling experts who turned raw recollections into legal definitions. A psychologist specializing in power dynamics explained that consent loses meaning when every decision is filtered through fear of retaliation, financial loss, or public shaming. She compared Mia's frozen reactions to the reflex of factory workers during early industrial accidents, noting that people often comply outwardly while their internal alarm bells are blaring, a survival response rather than agreement. A labor law professor followed, mapping each incident to statutes that prohibit forced labor even in glamorous workplaces. He highlighted how strict scheduling, penalty threats, and withholding of pay elevate ordinary employment into a realm where the worker's free will is essentially leased out. Jurors took notes while he read from federal guidelines stating that coercion can be psychological as well as physical, meaning a person does not need visible bruises to be legally overpowered. The witness reminded them that an NDA cannot override basic human rights, and that a paycheck does not convert fear-based obedience into genuine permission. Next came a former federal investigator who specialized in enterprise cases. She drew a diagram of interconnected assistants, security teams, and doctors, pointing to each node where leverage replaced choice. Her testimony suggested that when every escape route, calling police, seeking medical help, quitting, funnels back through the same authority figure, the environment itself becomes the instrument of control. She cited examples from unrelated industries, where patrons use celebrity clout to sway police responses or medical reports, reinforcing the prosecution's argument that influence can operate as a silent weapon. Defense attorneys countered by emphasizing luxurious salaries, travel perks, and occasional promotions, implying that staff remained voluntarily. Yet, as the investigator explained, voluntary cannot exist when a single misstep ends careers, uproots visas, or shames reputations instantly. By the end of the day, the jury faced a pivotal question framed by these experts. Does a signed contract erase responsibility when fear dictates behavior? In their upcoming deliberations, they must decide whether Mia's silence over the years represented complicity or an unavoidable consequence of an empire that rewrote the rules of consent to suit its own preservation. Mia's testimony stitched together a mosaic of hidden routines, private codes, and carefully choreographed cleanups, revealing how an entire support system shielded a single figure from scrutiny. Her words transformed scattered rumors into a coherent narrative, showing how drivers, hotel managers, medical staff, and corporate departments each played a part in keeping inconvenient truths out of public view. More than any single accusation, it was the cumulative detail, the coded phrases, the midnight phone calls, the silent hotel corridors that persuaded listeners they were witnessing a pattern rather than isolated lapses. Expert witnesses then put legal flesh on those bones, explaining how influence can function like an invisible cage, making outward compliance look voluntary even when every choice is shaped by fear. By the time court adjourned, jurors had heard not only stories of unsettling encounters, but also a blueprint of an organization designed to erase them. The once shiny image of effortless glamour now looked more like a facade propped up by layers of unspoken pressure. Yet the most striking shift occurred outside the courthouse. Reporters who once speculated in cautious whispers now spoke openly about possible ripple effects across the industry. Former employees from other circles contacted journalists, hinting at similar patterns in their own workplaces. Advocacy groups announced hotlines for staff who felt trapped by celebrity power, and social media buzzed with calls for more transparent labor practices in entertainment. Mia's decision to break her silence acted like a small crack that spreads across tempered glass, weakening a surface long considered unbreakable. She is scheduled to return to the stand, and other witnesses wait in the wings, each carrying fragments of a story that could expand the scope of the case even further. Viewers following this trial now find themselves at a crossroads. Will this be a single high-profile reckoning, or the first domino in a chain reaction? For those who want to see how deep the fracture runs, the next court session promises answers, and perhaps new revelations no one has yet imagined. If this inside look left you questioning how power really operates behind the velvet ropes, make sure you don't miss what happens next. Tap subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share your thoughts in the comments so we can keep this conversation alive. More witnesses are ready to speak, more cracks are forming in the facade, and the next revelation could drop at any moment. Be here when it does. Stay tuned.